Welcome back. We're talking about President Obama's relations with Europe. Joining us now from London is Rem Korteweg. He's a senior research fellow with the Center for European Reform. Rem, welcome to the show. We have been talking about President Obama's foreign policy. We just heard two guests with widely differing views on what that foreign policy is. What is the view from Europe of this president?
Well, I think in general there is wide support for U.S. foreign policy under President Obama. Obviously, expectations before his presidency haven't entirely been met, but at the same time, those expectations before he took office in 2009 were astronomically high. We should remember that he won the Nobel Peace Prize before actually having gotten his feet under the table, so to speak. And any president, and I think a lot of Europeans would agree with this, any president in the US will confront obstacles. Now, there have been a number of obstacles in the transatlantic relationship. For instance, the NSA surveillance issue, which is a real irritant in relations between Europe and the United States. But there has also been a lot of room for cooperation, and particularly now in light of the Ukraine crisis, there is a lot of transatlantic cooperation, and European leaders see or welcome U.S. leadership when it comes to dealing with a resurgent Russia and helping to stabilize Ukraine.
Okay, as you say, a lot of room for cooperation when it comes to the Ukraine issue. Does the United States and Europe speak with one voice when it decides how to respond to Russia over the Ukraine crisis?
No, it doesn't, but so neither does the EU itself, and nor should we expect it to do so. The European Union is made up of 28 different countries that all have their own unique set of interests, particularly when it comes to dealing with a country that is so close and so large as Russia. And so, no, the EU and Russia or the EU and the United States do not see eye to eye on all the issues. For instance, the United States would prefer to see a much stronger, much more robust response from the European Union when it comes to dealing with Russia. But for obvious economic and political reasons, European Union member states have different perspectives. There is a debate going on inside the European Union how strongly to enforce a sanctions regime against Russia. However, having said that, there is a common denominator, and that has been agreed. And as in any diplomatic process, it's a process of give and take. And what we've seen coming out of the G-7 recently, but also in previous weeks, is a process of reaching a common understanding. But I don't think it's anything to be surprised about.
Well, you say a common denominator, but it's a very low common denominator, isn't it? In many ways, it undermines U.S. foreign policy when it comes to dealing with Russia and the president getting what he wants.
No, I don't know. I think that it's the more important signal is to demonstrate to President Putin in this case that there is a common Western response. And sure, the United States would perhaps like to see more sanctions that target specific sectors. That's in a way, it's easy for the United States to make that case because it's not as exposed to Russian energy as some European member states are. But at the same time, the Europeans like to demonstrate that they have reached agreement on these limited sanctions, and they are moving towards developing a broader package. And we see in recent statements by President Putin that there is this this coherent response by the United States and Europe is having some effect in improving the climate a little bit. Not enough, but at least it creates a possibility for some sort of diplomatic dialogue to start with Russia.
Okay, now when it comes to the relationship with Moscow, let's take a listen to what the president said in Europe.
We are interested in good relations with Russia. We are not interested in threatening Russia. We recognize that Russia has legitimate interests in what happens along its borders and has a long historic relationship with Ukraine. But we also believe that the principles of territorial integrity and sovereignty have to be respected.
Now, Rem, when you listen to that, and you look at it from Europe, are you listening to a president who's trying to have it both ways here, who's saying, well, you know what, we've got to treat Russia with a great deal of respect on the one hand, on the other hand, we've got to get really tough with Moscow?
Well, I think he's playing to two audiences. On the one hand, he is indeed saying we need to respect the legitimate interest that Russia has, and nobody denies those interests. But I think there is also very strong European agreement, especially with countries that are the closest to the Russian border, that the use of force or the use of coercion to change boundaries in Eastern Europe is unacceptable. When I listen to the president, there is very little that I don't agree with. However, the question is, what does that mean? What does it lead to in terms of a response? And what you will also have seen is that his recent visit to Warsaw yesterday, that he made a commitment for pledging military support for the next year. These are important signals for Central and Eastern European countries, and they will want more. And this is something that will be a continuous debate also as we move towards the NATO summit later this year in September in Wales.
You know, the president has just completed the G-7 summit in Brussels. He moves on to Paris. President Putin will also be in Paris, but we understand that the host, the French president, will be hosting 2 dinners so that the leaders can be kept apart. But is there an opportunity here in Paris for President Obama to hold perhaps unscheduled talks with President Putin? Does he have to take that very decisive step?
I think it's something that we can hope for, but I don't think it's realistic to expect a real diplomatic breakthrough in Paris in the next 2 days between Obama and Putin. I think what we would primarily be looking forward to is to see if the newly minted or the freshly minted Ukrainian president, Petro Poroshenko, and Vladimir Putin, whether they have an unscheduled rendezvous. And that would be, in my mind, a real significant step forward. I wouldn't count too much on Putin and Obama meeting in Paris. Like you said, they're 2 different dinners. They're talking from 2 different, they're eating from 2 different plates, not only in terms of their food, but also in terms of their politics.
Because, you know, when one listens to what the president had to say about the relationship with Russia, about what he wants to do about Ukraine, he said Mr. Putin has a choice. Mm-hmm. He can make a decision that, having now begun to pull back his troops directly on the border, he also exerts his influence to get these separatist elements to stand down. That is among the things that he said. You know, it sounds more like a wish list rather than policy, rather than, you know, some decisive action that he wants to take.
Well, but it also raises the question, what can realistically be done in eastern Ukraine at the moment? There is one country and there is one person in that country who really holds the strings to what's happening in eastern Ukraine, and that is President Putin. Putin has the ability to influence what happens there by making a statement, calling back the separatists, or making a statement very clearly, unequivocally denouncing what is happening in eastern Ukraine. There have been reports that he has signaled his willingness to withdraw the troops on practicing on Ukraine's border, but as I've heard from recent statements by NATO generals, that really hasn't been moving forward as quickly as anticipated. So they're really, I mean, the ball is in Putin's court in this case. And yes, indeed, we the West or European and American leaders can only appeal to Putin to take these steps.
Rem Korteweg, thanks for joining us from London.
Thank you very much.
And that's it for this edition of The Heat. We'd love to hear from you, so please send us your questions, comments, and story ideas to theheat@cctv-america.com. And now you can listen to CCTV America programs 24/7 from anywhere in the United States by simply calling 231-460-1199. I'm Arnold Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.